Yep, that's our laptop.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks for the good introduction. Evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you're in the right place, but tonight's topic is maximising your sponsorship. Just to quickly run through the agenda and what's on the cards this evening, I'll give you a quick intro on myself and my background. Tackling what sponsors want is sort of the main focus for chapter one. What you can offer sponsors, what to say to sponsors and how to engage with them, putting a price on it and some of the work in terms of pricing, and then a little bit on detail, but it's far easier to keep sponsors than find new ones. We'll touch on that a little bit in a moment. I'm hoping to speak for sort of 45 minutes. At that stage, there will be questions. So please, as Martin said, please do put them in the chat function, and we'll go from there. So the RFU and my company has been Orchard Connects. We're a Cardiff-based sponsorship agency. I'm actually based in London, but we do, as Martin said, work across a number of different rights holders. I've got 25-ish years experience, much a lot of sport, a lot of rugby, but across the whole specifically relevant experience for me is I was head of sponsorship at Harlequins about 10-15 years ago. So I was responsible for a number of the deals that are still in place now, including DHL. And in terms of that community aspect, I was head of partnerships at Sport England for a while. So a good varied mix. Just to touch on some of the clients that I've worked with sort of in the last 10-15 years, Sport England Quins, as I mentioned, a lot of work in rugby, so supported Bath, London Irish with their pursuits, and then slightly more of community level or certainly lower level. Rosslyn Park recently, we're working with them, and then in terms of proper community and understanding some of the issues and challenges that you guys face. My background is I'm a hockey player, so I did a lot of sponsorship for Surbiton Hockey Club, as amongst other community groups as well. Objectives of this evening is to give you an overview of my thoughts on the sponsorship industry and what we believe companies want, what we're finding with the industry, hopefully provide some hints and tips on creating long-lasting and successful sponsorship programs. And as Martin alluded to, we've been working with the organisation RFU for about 18 months now, and put a lot of sort of developed a lot of resources and toolkits to help you, which we will send links to after. Just to touch on that toolkit, the main focus of sort of the resources is this. It's a very comprehensive guide to finding sponsorship. It's about 120 pages, but it's very much designed for you to dip in and dip out of, hopefully very easy to navigate, covering a number of the subjects that we'll deal with tonight. But as you can see there, a very wide-ranging breadth of topics in how to secure sponsorship and managing an effective sponsorship program. In addition to the toolkit, we've also developed a whole load of templates in terms of sales presentations, which you can access. Hopefully, you'll find them very easy to use. We'll give you some exciting thoughts in terms of how to position your sponsorship to businesses in your area or even sort of further afield. And then there's also a number of different templates such as contract agreements, and then what we call an asset register, which is really a vital tool for you to help understand what you've got in the way of sponsorship, particularly looking at all of your inventory and going from there. As I say, we'll send more details out regarding that after the session. So quickly a poll. Just want to get an understanding and a grasp of your role in the company, in the club regarding sponsorship. A number of options there. So one, you look after the sponsorship and it's your one role for the club. Two, you work with a number of different people across the club to find sponsors. C, perhaps not too involved, but you lend a hand, but you don't really support in other areas. And then finally, D, sort of a bit of a hero for the club, have lots of roles, and sponsorship is one. It would just be good to get an understanding on those. So I'll leave that up for a minute or two. Martin, I see the answers coming in. Shall I?
Yeah, I'll end the poll now for you, Tom,
Alex, sorry, Alex, thanks.
and I'll share the results.
Great,
Seems to be we have people who do loads of roles, particularly
great.
around sponsors.
So lots of club superheroes. Excellent news. Great, really interesting. Thanks for that. So moving on, in terms of what we believe sponsors want, I think it's worth just touching on what the sponsors can bring to your club as well. I mean, obviously the main focus and the ambition in most cases is to bring in cash and revenue. But certainly when you're thinking about sponsorship, think about some of the other things that organizations can help you with, such as kit, whether that's directly them providing kit or funding kit. Marketing and promotional support. A lot of organizations, particularly if they're on the high street, can help promote the club, whether that's obviously looking for other sponsors, but also helping with player recruitment, etc., and some of what maybe events and games coming up. Business support, certainly if you're looking to partner with a local law firm or an accountancy firm is a good example. Perhaps ask them to support, particularly accountancy firms is good if you're at the stage of going through your books and tax for the year, etc. A local firm can definitely help with that. And finally, I think it's worth touching upon the important role that sponsorship can have. A really big sponsor, really good club sponsor really can help give more pride to the players, help the member base, and really help the club to stand out. So it's not just about cash. There are other opportunities for sponsors to help you with that. So think about that when you're developing your plans. And in terms of what the sponsors want, I think we touched upon this in Martin's poll. I think a lot of the areas I'm going to touch on you actually covered, but yes, it is about increasing awareness in some cases. But more crucially these days, it's about engagement. So yes, branding is important, and this will be a bit of a theme for the day. Branding is important, but think about how you can really offer engagement to your players or to the membership base. So things like using obviously your social media, your website. I certainly would recommend considering if you don't having a newsletter and sending that out regularly. Again, it's a really vital tool for sponsors to be able to talk to your membership base, and that fundamentally is one of the reasons why they'll get involved in your club. Clearly, most businesses want to increase sales. So again, perhaps think of beyond branding, whether there is an opportunity for them to have a little promotional space or a little table at home games, or during minis coaching on a Sunday. Is there an opportunity to engage with parents whilst the boys and girls are playing? Could be all kinds of sort of small retail businesses this is applied to. I've seen some examples of local restaurants doing that and doing little leaflet drops and maybe even a little bit of taste of some of their menu. So a number of different opportunities there. Corporate entertainment, I know some people mentioned it in the initial poll. It is important. So think about how you can entertain them at your club, even if it's providing tickets. If you don't have tickets, maybe just give them a free pint or a little bit of food, that kind of thing. Clearly, access to international tickets is important as well. So think about that when you're developing your sponsorship packages. And then finally, and I know it came across fairly strongly in the poll as well, the opportunity to give back to the community and provide presence and community purpose is really key. I think even in some of the big global sponsorships that we're doing now, it's very much around social purpose, which is a real buzzword in the industry. So it's about how businesses of all shapes and sizes can support the community, make a bit of a big difference. There is potentially more to that. I think one of the exciting things of sponsorship is hugely multifaceted. So when you are talking to brands, be bold enough to ask them what they want, and there might be some areas they particularly want to focus in outside of those five there. But most sponsorships will cover those five bases for your club sponsorship. So just me, and make sure you listen. Current major growths in um, our belief, particularly around sort of community, again, is that social purpose and the good cause involvement. So think about that when you're talking to sponsors and how you frame your sponsorship. Women's rugby and sport, obviously hugely growing, and rightfully so. It really is now a commercial opportunity in its own right, thankfully. So, the work that perhaps the club's doing with women will be of interest to local businesses, and they can champion women's sport going forward. It's a huge area, not just in community sport, but as you'll have seen, nationally and internationally as well. Um, and then increasingly brands see themselves as storytelling platforms. And by that, I mean really fundamentally you giving them content that they can use on their media channels, social media, even sort of smaller restaurants, estate agents, that kind of thing will be interested in telling the story, talking about the sponsorship, talking about the club, because it's great content for their own channels. In terms of observations of the industry, I think so you only just have to pick up a newspaper to see the world as it is at the moment. I think it is tough, which no one wants to hear, but deals are being done, despite the economy, and a lot of the current affairs at the moment. And in some cases, going back to that sort of social purpose, actually the financial environment can help you. Again, the social purpose, opportunity, and effectively funding causes that need it. You can certainly play on that. The key theme from my side is that branding is important, but it's really not everything these days. So when you're thinking about sponsorship for the club, don't just think about what you can brand. Think about some of the other benefits that I've mentioned earlier, and we'll mention in the next chapter as well. And often, again, a theme for the day, less is often more. So perhaps consider, and we'll come on to it in more detail, having fewer sponsors with less branding. So therefore, the branding is more valuable to the sponsors you do have, but building packages that include other elements away from branding, and therefore justifying a higher level of income, and therefore potentially having fewer sponsors, which is obviously makes it easier for you to manage, particularly if you're volunteers and don't have a lot of time to spend on sponsorship. I would suggest sponsorship as a partnership. It's not just a one-way traffic. The best sponsorships are those that work two ways, and there's constant dialogue throughout the season. They're the sponsorships that can work best. So it's not necessarily just a transaction of you giving them branding, and they give you a check. The best sponsorships do work in a sort of two ways. So build those relationships, and again, we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. And then finally, and I'll come on to this in a little bit more detail. It's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln. If I had 9 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first six sharpening my axe. Basically, what I'm suggesting is certainly using our resources and toolkit and the templates, get your foundations of the sponsorship right, build really valuable packages, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. But it's certainly worth, again, particularly with the time being precious, worth spending a bit of time up front, getting that all right, getting your sales deck right, getting a sponsorship letter right, and then it'll be valuable in the future, should make the process far easier. So think about that. And again, we'll come on to exactly what that looks like in the next couple of slides as well. So another poll, just keen to understand the major issues you face with regard to sponsorship. It is a lack of time or capacity. Do you feel there's a lack of understanding, possibly experience or confidence? Perhaps you've felt that you've tried everyone in the local community. Have you exhausted all avenues, or is there another reason for that? And if so, perhaps you can put that in the chat. So I'll give you a minute or two to complete that.
Most have come in now, Tom.
Great. Shall we?
So I'll end the poll
Look
there
in?
and share the results. And as you can see, there's sort of a lack of capacity. Time is
Great.
the major one, followed by lack of understanding, experience, confidence.
And just to add into that, Tom, as well, we've had a couple of comments in the chat, and in terms of us, his apparent lack of interest, so that
Okay.
sort of apathy towards sponsorship and the value
Okay.
of it, I
So
suppose.
the that lack of interest we'll deal with, and hopefully will help you with your sponsorship narratives in sort of 5-10 minutes or so. In terms of the timing and capacity issues, again, we'll send you the resources or link to the resources that we've developed, which hopefully will make your lives far easier and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you in terms of developing presentations and emails that can be very quickly sent out to people. And then, as I say, getting the framework right. So the sponsorship negotiation hopefully is far easier for you. Okay, moving on. What can you offer sponsors? I think the crucial thing, as I've alluded to earlier, is certainly consider um, getting fewer sponsors, but building more valuable packages across the whole club. And I'll come on to a couple of examples of that on the next slide. But I would recommend building a sponsorship structure and sort of challenging what you're doing at the moment. I'm not sure if any of you have got a main club sponsor, but again, that's a very effective way of bringing in decent revenue and having one sponsor who can have possibly branding across the whole club, but a whole host of package benefits as well. Again, looking to make your life easier and save you some time by having one sponsor rather than 15 or 20 for the amount of benefits that you're providing. Fewer sponsors, more value. It also avoids clutter. And by that, I mean having too many brands at the club or too many logos at the club. Again, will help you justify a higher fee in your sponsorship revenues. And then finally, it's much easier to manage. I think the other recommendation, particularly with the time precious feedback that we're getting, is whether you consider doing multi-year deals. So rather than negotiating obviously every year, possibly consider doing 3-year deals, which again will make your life easier, reduces your time, but also guarantees crucially income for the club over a number of different years as well. And you can build payment structures around that. So it's not just a one fee for 3 years. They can absolutely pay for per year or every 6 months, whatever's easiest for them. And then just to touch on how we look to sort of structure ideally, and there is more than one way to do this, but consider maybe a one main sponsor. Some of the bigger clubs consider stadium sponsor. I know some of the Premiership clubs do that. And then look to have 6 or 7 lower level deals at tier 2, and then possibly some supplier deals there again. So when it's not hundreds of sponsors, it's easier to manage, and you're building packages around each of those different tiers, which will provide value. And again, finally, I love my quotes. So sometimes less is more. So perhaps consider having fewer sponsors, providing more value. In terms of what those packages could look like, we've touched on some of this, but certainly the association with the club is important. And looking at, again, that social purpose and the association with a community club and being a champion of the community. Branding is important, although it's not the be all and end all. So certainly consider that. And that branding obviously includes on shirt, things like perimeter boards, certainly on website and on newsletters, maybe in the clubhouse. If you've got TV screens, possibly using them to show logos, etc., and maybe adverts if appropriate. Look at your events. I'm sure you all do regular lunches, so invite sponsors to those. Whether you have end of season dinners, etc., again, if appropriate, make sure you invite sponsors to those. Tickets, hospitality. Appreciate not every club will sell tickets, but if you do, then certainly give tickets as part of the package, possibly hospitality. I mentioned maybe a sandwich and a pint will constitute hospitality in my eyes. Clearly, and I know a number of you mentioned it in the beginning, tickets to the England games, so obviously consider that appropriately. Access to the club, by that I mean using your clubhouse for their own purposes, such as workshops, meetings. That can also extend to the ground as well. And a lot of clubs these days hire out their club to local businesses who might want to do a touch game or a corporate rugby festival. Doesn't have to be rugby as well. Increasingly, clubs, particularly in the summer, might hire out the space to do appropriate barbecues or summer fetes or family days, etc., for their staff. Should those companies be big enough? Access to talent. If you've got really dynamic players or coaches who want to do some coaching sessions for local businesses, etc., then by all means do that. Sales rights works much better perhaps for some of the smaller companies in the area. So pushing business of that, whether it's an estate agent, local restaurant, local retailer, that kind of thing. And then data access. By that I mean fundamentally using your tools, such as the website again, social media, newsletters, so that the sponsors can use that as a vehicle to promote themselves. I don't suggest for a second that you hand over database, obviously with data protection, etc., but work together to look at how they can access your membership and player network as well. Content I touched on earlier, looking at perhaps you giving them images from a weekend, or if you do a regular match report, pushing that out to the sponsors as well, so they can put it on their social media channels and celebrate the fact they're a sponsor. And then clearly there's web and digital access as well. So working together to post some of the stories that they want the club to promote as well. If it's a local car dealership, for instance, if they've got a new model in their forecourt promoting that, or a restaurant discount, etc., etc. So basically working with partners to really establish what they want. And I strongly suggest building packages that might contain all of those different elements rather than possibly selling off each of these individually, if you like. I strongly recommend you build those packages. Some examples of great work that we've seen, and some of you may already do this, but this is Horsham Rugby Club, who do have a main sponsor, and it works really well for them. As you can see there, that's the men's first team in the background and some of the minis in front of them. It's the same one single sponsor across all of those elements. I appreciate in some cases it might be difficult and you might have established relationships with parents sponsoring minis clubs, etc., etc. But if possible, I strongly recommend you consider sort of one sponsor across the whole of the club in terms of branding. It works very well for Horsham. They sponsor with a property company, and it's a very good, almost six-figure sum that they get out from the property company. So certainly worth thinking about. Again, obviously with other elements of a package as well. Some of the better creative ones. This is Old Falerians, who have a partnership with a local pizza company. A couple of things with this deal, which is really interesting. One, sometimes they provide the teas to the players, which is a really good way, obviously, for them to get their products in front of the players. They also have a Monday night club night, whereby they provide discounts for any club member in their restaurant, and any profit that that restaurant makes goes actually back into the club as well. So quite a good little revenue stream for that. They're present at most match days, handing out flyers and leaflets and discounts, and they obviously promote membership discounts on their website as well. So just think about some of the business cases for each of these individual organizations. Final example, just quickly on this, is car dealership. This is Salisbury. This is actually a picture taken on a match day. As you can see, they've essentially extended their forecourt by showing a couple of new models at the club on a Saturday, and people, not a terribly good example, but certainly when I walked past, there were people getting in the car and having a good old feel, and basically promoting the fact that, as I say, it's a new launch, and trying to get people down to their dealership for sales reasons. So again, a couple of reasons for sponsorship that goes much beyond the branding and perhaps hospitality as well. So some food for thought there. Quickly, another poll. Just want to get a sense of how many sponsors you have. Hopefully, most of you know, but in some cases you might not. So not sure, but I guess not enough. Not sure, but I guess too many. Less than 10, between 10 and 15, and over 25. There's not necessarily a right answer to this, but as I say, that certainly have a think about in future fewer sponsors, in terms of building a package, etc. I'll leave that with you for a second or two.
Okay, Tom, most of them are in now, mate. So I'll end the
Right.
poll there
Yeah.
and share the results. Of a mixed bag, so 40% less than 10. The next highest, as you can see, between 10 and 25. But we do have 21% who have over 25 different sponsors.
Interesting. Yeah, again, hopefully the recommendations that I'm making will ring true with some of that as well, and particularly if you've got sort of on the face of it less sponsors that you'd want, consider how you can enhance their packages to justify higher spend from them. I would certainly recommend doing. Great. Okay, moving on in terms of engaging with sponsors and what to say to sponsors. And I think one of the questions earlier was around narrative. I think crucially, particularly now, and as I say, the topic of social purpose, it's sponsorship isn't just about Saturday afternoon at a rugby club. Have a think about what else you do as a club and how important you are to the local community. Do you have any unique features that you can use in your sales materials? So are you the biggest or the best sports club in the area? I think it's important to look at other sports clubs and what they're doing as well, and position yourself very much as a sports club in the community rather than just a rugby club. Think about how many people you engage with each week. Again, not just rugby. A lot of the clubs we've spoken to through this project do other things, such as NHS clinics, such as regular runs, etc. Use of gyms. So have a think about all of those people that come to your club, and then see. Hopefully, it's a reasonably big number. We've spoken to a number of clubs about this, and all of a sudden their sort of annual footfall can be up to 10, sort of 20,000, which once you start saying that to potential sponsors, the conversation around money become far easier, because it's more than just engaging with the local club. It's sort of health and well-being and all that kind of thing. So here we go. What do you do beyond rugby, and what do you do for the local community? Again, companies of all shapes and sizes are very keen to support the local community, particularly around health and well-being and sustainability, those kind of things. So have a think about what work you do in those areas, and you'll see when you look at the templates, this is a big focus for us in terms of how to drive sponsorship for your clubs. Again, being very much part of the local community and extending beyond rugby. And also talk about your future plans. Are you growing the mini section? Can a sponsor help you on that journey equally with men, with the women's side of the sport? Can you help? Can the sponsors help with that side of the club? Also, they might be interested in funding some of your investment plans as well. So, do you have plans for a new clubhouse? Can they help support that? Maybe floodlights, maybe new pitches, etc. There's often opportunities around that. And as I say, again, being champions of that local community and making a positive difference around that. So really think about that. In terms of communication with sponsors, it's really is about making a good first impression. It's very easy these days to understand what a company's objectives are, particularly the medium, larger businesses in the area will have websites which will have a lot of this information on. So see if they sponsor any other clubs or initiatives in the area. If they do, certainly use that to your advantage. And again, it allows them to be much more of a pillar of the community. I think it's important to have clear business cases, whether you're talking to a sole trader or a larger business in the area. So be bold enough, if you don't understand their objectives, to ask them what they want to achieve and what their focus is on as an organisation. Obviously, estate agents, etc., want to build their database of local people. So can the club help them with that in terms of newsletter and flyers in the clubhouse, etc., etc. Make sure it is relevant and understanding. I think ideally Certainly you want to try and negotiate and be aware of what they want to do. So show that understanding, show their relevance, hopefully using some of the examples that I've mentioned earlier, particularly again, if it's a restaurant, and what they can do for you. Fantastic part of sponsorship is you can be very creative. Again, hopefully some of the ideas earlier showed that. And then finally, make sure there's a call to action. So if you are sending an information to them, and I'll come on to what that looks like, make sure there's a call to action. So I will email you again in a week, or I will call you in a week, should you have time. Or if time is slightly more precious, maybe invite them to a game, or might invite them to an event at the club. It's a great way for them, one, to have fun and see the club, but also obviously it gives you a great opportunity to talk to them when you're at the club anyway. So hopefully it eases any burdens on timing in that. We all get rejections. There's a couple of reasons here. Obviously, lack of budget is a big one. People can't afford things, doesn't fit with objectives, or not currently looking at sponsorship for some of the bigger companies who might do sponsorship regularly. I think the crucial thing here is messages just to build those relationships, and often timing is key. I've done a number of deals where I've been told no initially, and then you go back in 6 months and have a slightly different conversation, and then the sponsorship comes to fruition. So where you can, it's about building relationships, and again, using some of your assets. If they are a rugby fan, get them to the club for games, or invite them to events, etc., etc. To target potential sponsors, I'm sure most of you do this already, but obviously you really want businesses who know the club already. So really focus on those that are very local to you. Use your network. So consider players and ex-players, and particularly if players or ex-players run their own businesses, it's often a good way of doing that. And again, understand what they want to achieve. A lot of them will obviously want a good day out on a Saturday. So think about that sort of hospitality angle, and whether you can offer them places at lunch, or a free drink, or other benefits such as tickets at events, that kind of thing. Utilize your membership. So if you do have a newsletter, certainly promote the fact you're looking for sponsors through that. Use your website and social media channels as well, as much as you can. And a lot of this is obviously trying to make your lives easier, but trying to build your database of potential sponsors as much as you can. And then a really valuable one, particularly I find with my hockey club, is actually use of parents, and promoting the fact you're looking for sponsors during Minis Day on a Sunday, or Juniors Day on a Sunday, and trying to understand which parents are maybe decision makers of some of the larger companies in the area, or have their own businesses who might be interested in it. Again, it's about promoting that and just understanding what they want, and talking through that with them in more detail. The way we promote sponsorships is, as I say, obviously through the club website and social media channels. In some cases, and this is aimed at easing the workload for you, possibly using Chamber of Commerce and business networks in the area. We've certainly seen clubs who actually host Chamber of Commerce events or business network events at their club for free of charge, in the hope that obviously it gets 20, 30, 40 local businesses to the club, seeing the club, and at which point you can then talk to them. And it's a really very time effective way of speaking to a number of businesses in the area. Those of you who have LinkedIn, I would strongly recommend using that. I certainly use that even for sort of some of the global sponsorships I'm working on. And I would certainly consider, if the club doesn't, having a LinkedIn page, which again, you can use some of the content that you might use on Twitter or X or Facebook. And it obviously will focus on more of the business community. It also allows you to look at who the local businesses are in the area. And particularly get names of potential people. So if it's a larger business in the area, have a think about marketing directors who likely, or new business development directors who are likely to be the ones with budget to spend on looking at sponsorship. And then finally, use company websites. particularly, as I say, if time allows, doing some research to understand who's in the area and what their objectives are. It's a lot of information will be gained from that, even some of the smaller, medium-sized businesses in the area. In terms of how we promote sponsorship opportunities, and all of this is included in the toolkit, and there are templates to hopefully that you can lift very quickly and without spending too much time on it. More often than not, we make contact through short emails these days. A little teaser, which tends to be sort of a 4 or 5 page color brochure, really. And again, there's templates on this, so you shouldn't have to spend too much time doing it. A teaser, as we call them, or the brochure, is something you can send out very quickly. And again, getting email addresses from targets outside of the club is possible through LinkedIn and actually just Googling often as well. But where you can obviously collect emails from those members, parents, etc., who might be the right people to talk to about sponsorship. And then a longer form sales deck. So if someone is interested, you can send this out, and it will contain much more information about the club, and including information about the sponsorship opportunity. And again, our certainly recommendation is to look at how you can build packages, valuable packages with a number of different benefits, and that can all be included in the sales deck. Once again, there's information in the resources that we will push you towards after this session. Moving on, a couple of things to remember. I think it is sponsorship. It can be time consuming, and it's certainly worth, if you can, having a proper conversation with potential sponsors. And as I said earlier, just be bold enough to ask them what they want, really, and make sure you listen, and then you can adjust your sponsorship's approach or what they want, and include that in your packages. Ideally, have a plan. So going back to setting those foundations, if you are considering having a main club sponsor, which I would consider, be very focused on doing that. But that said, if it's not working, then by all means do change it or alter it based on some of the feedback. If you're getting a lot of people saying you can't afford it, then obviously look at adjusting the price. If there's certain themes or etc. of people saying no, then obviously adapt that accordingly. Unfortunately, there is no easy answer to this. So patience is a bit of a virtue, and you might have to, for want of a better phrase, kiss a number of different frogs to get there. But again, hopefully our resources will help you make that time, hopefully make that more easy. But it is about engaging with as many businesses as you can. Hopefully some of the ideas in this presentation will help you with that. Be professional, and also be realistic. So obviously don't ask for silly amounts of money, or ask for silly things. It is important to be professional. And again, a lot of this is about building relationships. So if they say no now, hopefully they'll remember you positively, and it might be something that they'll do further down the line. So we'll send this presentation out, but a few considerations when approaching sponsors. I'm aware of time, so I won't necessarily go through them all. But just be very clear on what your ask is. Be very clear on what makes you different and how you stand out to other clubs or in the area, and just be very clear and come across as professional. A lot of this information, as I said, is included in the resources. There's an example there of the sales template, which includes a number of images and copy that you can just lift and use for your own needs. So please do take the time to look at those. Putting a price on it is, as you can imagine, one of the hardest things to do. And obviously, speaking to a huge number of different clubs this evening, it's difficult for me to give one answer for all. But what I'll talk generally about that, and again, there is much more information within the toolkit, particularly, which is a very extensive chapter on some tips and hints and recommendations on how we go about it. But just to touch on that this evening, I think it's important to state that sponsorship does have a commercial value. It's not necessarily just about cost. So if something costs you £1,000, don't necessarily just ask for £1,000. It will have a commercial value based on obviously the number of members and players, whether there's any media coverage, including obviously events if they're being part of an event, etc. Think about the network of people that will reach. That said, sponsors will only pay what it's worth to them. Ultimately, I think an easy reference to say it is a bit like buying and selling a house. So ultimately, it's two parties agreeing on a price. There isn't a golden rule. And obviously, stating the obvious, be realistic. And I suggest, if possible, you be flexible as well. So I would, and again, there's much more information in the toolkit about getting that sort of base fee, if you like, but be willing to be flexible and accommodate their needs. So maybe ask for a little bit more than you believe it's worth, on the basis that there will be a negotiation element as well. And where you can, benchmark and justify. So we'll come on to that now. Have a think about your cost considerations. It's very much stating the obvious, but obviously if it's including perimeter boards or a table with lunch, etc., factor in those costs. It's amazing how many sponsorships, even some of the big global ones, lose sight of the costs and therefore obviously make a loss. What's worked well for you in the past? I think that's the most accurate and easiest way to do it. So where have you made money from sponsorship in the past, and what level was that at? Obviously, if sponsorships are selling very easily at that price, then consider raising it. If not, and if it's proving hard, then possibly reduce the price and have a look at that. And then the other thing is obviously to mention looking at multi-year deals as well, factoring that in. I think the rugby network is great. It's often worth just asking if you're speaking to an away committee member. Maybe just be bold enough to ask them what they get for their sponsorship, and it's a good way of showing what brands are willing to spend for a community sponsorship rugby. And then you can, for certainly some of the bigger clubs, collect info from other sources. Some larger sponsorships are mentioned in rugby press or sports press in terms of size of deals. So think about doing that. And then sometimes clubs use newsletter advertising rate cards from local newspapers. So you'll get a steer of sort of what the cost per 1,000 is or cost per 100 is for an advert in a local paper, and use that to your advantage. Pick up the local paper, see who's advertising, and perhaps speak to them saying, I know you're advertising the local paper. We've got X 100 members. It's a far more effective way of speaking to the local community, and use that rate card as a bit of a benchmark in the newspaper to price your own sponsorship. So a couple of ideas. Appreciate that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour and it's quite a complex area. But as I said, there is much more information in the toolkit as well. And any questions in the chat, maybe not tonight, but I'll endeavour to answer any of those. Finally, keeping sponsors happy. I think, as I said earlier, it's far easier to keep sponsors happy than start from afresh. I think the biggest message is to look at this as a partnership. So certainly share info where you can, such as logos and imagery. So encouraging them to put logos on their websites, or if maybe shop front if it's a smaller business, or restaurants work quite well. Again, my hockey club do that with a number of local restaurants in the area. Be very clear on roles and responsibilities within the club, and the organisation as well. So basically, it's about forming a decent relationship. So you know who to speak to and how to support each other in delivering sponsorship. Invite them to as many events as you can, or as many as appropriate, and make them aware of what's going on in the club. Again, really pushing on that partnership and relationship, whether it's the fixture card on a Saturday, the minis games, or looking at sort of bigger Christmas events, summer events, those kind of things. Make sure they're aware of any news. Some of the bigger clubs, particularly if it's a new signing or a retiring legend of the club, they might want to be aware of that and be there for such events. make them very aware of important club and selection news if possible. Promote the fact that you are getting new sponsors on is really key as well. So really talk about that again in newsletters and on website, and it will create a bit of a stir around potential other sponsors as well. That it's a club on the rise and new sponsors are coming on board. Potentially funding announcements as well. So really just focusing on content that will drive and make it interesting for local businesses in the area. And then finally, just additional tips and keeping happy again, maybe giving them shirts. Doesn't necessarily have to be signed, but certainly some of the bigger clubs do that very well. Whether there's opportunities for staff incentives, again, looking at sort of your events or maybe discounts behind the bar, those kind of things. Ensuring partner page has a logo on. Again, engagement is a crucial thing here. So where possible, certainly provide them with a hyperlink to their website, assuming they have one, or promoting their social media. And then thank them for support regularly, which sounds very easy, but a lot of clubs don't do this. And possibly, obviously, on a Saturday at the matches as well. Make sure that they're rewarded and thanked for their sponsorship. In terms of renewal conversations, I think, as I said, the aim ideally is to try and get multi-year deals. But it's easier to, as I say, easier to keep a sponsor than find a new one. Where possible, perhaps start renewal conversations with them. I would suggest 3 months away from the contract end, or if it is a season long deal, maybe sort of December, January, February time. And then again, just the crucial element for us is looking at building a relationship. So make sure you ask them what their objectives are and whether you feel they've been delivered. And if they haven't, obviously adapt that for future years, and look at other benefits, hopefully, that have been added into this presentation by means of enhancing that deal. And then where possible, collate information if you can to demonstrate how well it's done. This could be very simple in terms of whether there's pictures that on your website, if they're branding in the background, or if they're branding on the shirt, examples on your social media, etc. Appreciate time is precious, but those little factors can help to make the sponsor seem much happier and more valued. And obviously, if they're happy, then you can ask for much more money further down the line. So finally, thoughts and summary. I think sponsorship is in a good place despite the economy, and deals are being done. There is no easy way to do this, but hopefully with tonight and some of our resources, we're making you aware of new bits of opportunity, and hopefully there's a couple of nuggets you can take away that will help with your sponsor program. And then finally, please do use our sponsorship toolkit and the templates, which we'll share, as I said, after the session as well. And there'll be hopefully some golden information in that for you as well. So that is it for me. Hopefully a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully a number of different nuggets that you can take away, which will work for you.
Tom, thanks very much. I appreciate that. Was a huge amount of content, and so just a couple of things just to sort of reiterate from what Tom's mentioned. We will share the deck with you, so you have that and you have time to go through it. We have got a little bit of time now, and there's a couple of points that have popped up through the chat, and so Tom, I'll pose a couple of those. If you do have any sort of burning questions, please pop them in the chat now. If we run out of time, and we'll sort of run for as long as people are comfortable with, then when I send the follow-up email, if you have a question, then please do share that. There are some really great comments that have been made in the chat by some of you, and I think it's wonderful to share the practices that clubs and the ideas that other clubs have got. So again, we'll lift those from the chat and we'll share them. So Tom, just a quick one from there was a question from Andy going back into your slides earlier. There was the one around what you can offer, and one of the things you talked about, sales rights, and I think Andy just was a little bit uncertain about what that meant. I think it was around slide 20 with your list of different bits and bobs. So if you can just sort of say what that was really around sales rights.
Sales rights, in this context, it's more promotion of sales, so giving them a platform to sell products or promote their services. So the example I gave, I think, was giving them a little desk or a table on match day where they can hand out flyers, or if appropriate, if it's I don't know, a local biscuit maker. I don't know why that came to mind, but handing out product and flyers by means of promoting their services and selling product. Obviously, potentially giving them retail rights at the in the ground as well. The other thing to mention is website is a useful tool to that. So again, encouraging our sponsors, and I can see from the chat that some of you do it already, is offering discounts on products and services as well is a very effective way of doing it. And where you can prove a direct return on investment very quickly, you're far more easier. It's far more easier to negotiate a decent fee for yourselves there. But yeah, number of different ways of doing that. And again, further information in the toolkit on that.
Brilliant. A couple of questions in and around sort of player sponsorship, and there was an interesting point raised around the number of sponsors, and clearly, if you've got your team, and I know my own club does, they try and sort of sell the individuals and so on. And then the comment around having too many sponsors, I think it's important, probably, isn't it, to sort of look at your player sponsorships. If you had I don't know, three teams and everyone was sponsored, that would be a significant number. So just if you want say anything further on player sponsorship, and whether you've seen any examples with any of the clubs you've worked and where you thought actually they did a really good job.
There's
I would say
two things or three things on this. One, I have to be honest, and I'm happy to debate it with anyone at another time. My take on player sponsorship's not always that positive. I think it often requires a lot of work for not a lot of gain. That said, to caveat it, obviously, if it's working for you and you've got a huge number of players sponsored, and it's providing a nice revenue stream, then by all means do keep doing it. One of the solutions that we've introduced to a couple of clubs, which actually is working, is essentially building a business club. Rather than having player sponsorship, and building again, there's more information in the toolkit, and I can actually share some further information maybe after this around a limited number of benefits, including maybe hosting a lunch, having information on the website, using the club for their own events, and building a package around that. And you can have 20 or 30 partners of a business club which will pay more money for that rather than a player sponsorship. So it's a more effective use of assets rather than a player sponsorship. Again, if the player sponsorship's working for you and you're getting a nice revenue from a lot of partners, then by all means carry on doing it. In my experience, a lot of clubs struggle with that. But as Martin alluded to, it is a currency that's quite common with clubs. I would certainly consider doing other elements. And as I said, there's information in the toolkit, and we've called it business club basically. But as I say, if it's working for you, great.
Thanks, Tom. I'd reiterate that. I think if it is working for you, then that's great. And I think the comment we've seen in the chat, if you've got time and you've got capacity, then I think it's a really interesting piece there. Is there a one size fits all? Is there a perfect scenario? No. And if it's working for you, great. If you want to enhance other areas of it, that's the key thing. So I know there are some chats, some comments in the chat here, which please, we're not saying don't do it, but it's just Tom's experience and Tom's comments on that. So we're coming up to 8 o'clock. If you've got to head off now, we absolutely do understand that. So if you do need to dip out, we did say it was only an hour, then no problem at all, please do. If you've got any sort of further points or questions that you want to sort of pop into the chat, then we'll stay on for a few more minutes and we'll do that. I know there's a comment, and Tom, this is not necessarily for you, but Lisa's popped into the chat, and I will ask it. Is anyone using GMS or their e-newsletters? sorry, is anyone using GMS for their e-newsletters, or do they use other platforms such as MailChimp? So if anyone's got any sort of thoughts on that, stick it into the response back into Lisa. I think she's sort of trying to understand which might be the better way of communicating. I do know that from a marketing perspective, Lisa, some people do use MailChimp. They find it easy to do. It all depends on the individual. You can use GMS, but again, you need to be quite mindful about what you're sending out to your members from a data protection perspective, even though they are your members. You just have to be mindful on that. It looks like we've got Mark's just made that comment there in terms of regular comms for MailChimps. And Andy's talked about the Pitch Hero, so they have. I think in terms of questions, that was pretty much, we've got everything. Alex, if you can help me in case I've missed any. Alex has put the guide in for the link in for the guides and the templates. I will send that into the email follow-up, as I mentioned, but it's worth reiterating that the templates, particularly, they are in a PowerPoint presentation format that you can literally take off, cut, paste, copy, do what you need to do. It's got imagery from RFU imagery. Please, by all means, choose to use that or use your own. The idea being that these are examples, but they're in a format that you can quite easily sort of edit, change, adapt as you need to, and then save as PDFs if you are then to send them out. So please do that. I'm just looking to see if we've got a couple more. It looks like we've got lots of people saying thank you. Alex has just put that in there. Andy, in terms of guidance on GDPR and so on, not necessarily now, but any resources on do's and don'ts. I'll double check what we've got, Andy. I'll pick that up. There are some comments, and you can find general guidance around GDPR. Data protection, as we know, it can be sort of quite daunting. I think we just have to. There are certain rules of thumb, and I'm not a lawyer, and so it's not right for me to sort of say that this is exactly what you should and shouldn't do. But just in terms of a principle, I would often say that if members of your club, when they've signed up, they may well have ticked a box which allows you to have communications. If they don't, then I would try to steer clear of that. So you just have to be mindful. But we'll try and dig out what guidance we can on GDPR for you.
Yeah, Martin, I've just put our link on data protection.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Thanks. So hopefully that's giving you some food for thought. Looking at some of the comments, it's really helpful. Even if you take one thing from tonight, we think that's been a real plus. Even if it's just reinforced some of the things that you're doing really well, then that's great to hear. So please, take from tonight as much as you can. But it's been great to have you. I'm just double checking to see if we've got any other comments, but it looks like most people are just saying thanks. Really good, really good, really good. So great to have you all with us. Have a super evening, and here's to a successful Six Nations weekend, whichever country you happen to be shouting for. But great to see you all.